All right, so we're talking about offices at the county level, right? We started looking at these, and we're looking at we've talked about the county judge. Now we're going to talk about the county court, commissioner's court. So the commissioner's court is made up of five folks, right? The county judge is the CEO of the county and the leader of the commissioner's court and a member of it. And then there are four county commissioners from the four precincts that the county is divided up into. And they are the legislature for the county. So your chief, right? The county judge is your CEO, right? And your governor, basically, right? And your legislature are your commissioners. And I think we talked last time a little bit about the judge here, right? Is the constitutional, his real title is a constitutional county court judge. And those constitutional county courts are courts that are supposed to actually be courts, right? Legal courts with civil and criminal trials and stuff. And when all this was originally put together, that's exactly what they did, right? The county judge was both the judge and the leader of the commissioner's court. So they were doing both of these. And as time has moved on, right, the chief executive officer duties have become the primary duties and the ones that take up all of their time. And judges, right, were being, right, forced to do an awful lot, both manage the court and manage the commissioner's court. So the legislatures solved most of this issue for the county judges in that they created county courts at law, which are statutory courts that had the same legal jurisdiction as the constitutional county court. So they basically duplicated it, right, and updated it a little bit. There were, under the Constitution, the constitutional county courts can only hear civil cases up to like $10,000. Of course, when that was passed in 1876, it's a lot of money. The county courts at law that the legislature, state legislature put into effect, their civil range goes up to $100,000. So civil lawsuits, $100,000 can be tried in those. So they got a little more leeway jurisdiction than the county judge does. But the county judge today, while they still can hold court and have the authority to render verdicts and do, most of their job is being handled by these county courts of law that have the same authority. And so the county judge is focused on running the county, which is more than enough of a job. So they're the presiding officer, right? They're the ones that call the meeting into order and make the agenda and move business around. And they are a voting member. That county judge is a voting member of the commissioner's court. So you have 5 voting members, one of them being the judge, the other one from the commissioners from the precincts. And they run the county. Right, that's their job, is to make the policy decisions for the county, and then the judge's job is, well, to help make those decisions and then to implement them, right, to make sure they get done. Because this is the county, right, the historical perspective of what the county is responsible for is, roads and bridges and the sheriff. Funding law enforcement, funding the courts, and public health, those kind of things. And we talked about that last time. We covered those. So that's what the county court is focused on. And you're elected as a commissioner, you're elected as a judge, right? You've got a 4-year term. Your job is to look after the business of the county and try to make sure you do a good job. And you're basically responsible for the monies that come in from property taxes into the county and running that budget and investing money and making sure that the infrastructure of the county is strong and being maintained. If you talk to somebody that's old enough, they'll refer to these county commissioners as road commissioners, right? Because that was their, the people saw them as being working, focused on the roads, building roads, and looking after the infrastructure of the county. And they call them road commissioners because you called the commissioner of your precinct when you needed a pothole to be filled, or runoff water to be diverted away from the highway, or you wanted to get a gravel road turned into an asphalt road, right? You call your road commissioner and ask for that kind of help, and because that's who's in charge of it, right? So this is right. The commissioner's court, right? County commissioner's court is that body of folks that we elect, county judge and 4 commissioners, to run the county government, right? And to represent us in the county and to try to deliver the things that we need in our county so it can be, an effective and efficient place to live. The next office at the county level we need to talk about is the county sheriff. Sheriffs are fascinating historical characters, right? The office of sheriff goes back literally into the 1500s in Europe and stuff, right? We had sheriffs being appointed as basically the king's hand, right, in throughout the lands of the king, and right, they were the voice of the law, right, the voice of the king down on the ground, and sheriffs won't let you forget that. Right? They know the history and providence of their office, and in the United States as a whole, right, this is the first and primary law enforcement officer position that we had. We had sheriffs appointed and to make sure that there's safety and protection in the cities and the areas. In Texas, our Constitution sets up the sheriff to be a county level office, right? The sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer for the county they're elected in. So we, right, the population of the county elect our sheriff, the person that's going to be responsible for, right, enforcing the law in our county. And then as sheriff, they're going to hire the deputies that they need to be able to do that job. Originally, right, the sheriff was your Old West version of, right, the big white cowboy hat and the vest and the horse and the gun and riding around trying to make sure that things are being done right, and we have this Wild West persona perspective of the Texas sheriff that still exists today from that, right, that history, that experience, and especially if you go out into the more rural counties, the sheriffs out there still kind of portray that image, right? But their job is not so much the rootin' tootin' shooting, ride a horse kind of thing, right? As it used to be, right? Their real job is now to be the administrator of law enforcement and right, and criminal justice within a county. And so they're much more administrators now than they used to be. But it's still an interesting kind of perspective of how they see themselves. So I'm just for grins here, I'm going to show you the stereotype of the Texas sheriff, right? Let's see if I can get this over there for you. Stop that real quick. And I didn't have to search much to get this, right? But this is a Texas sheriff, right? And you know it when you see it, right? I lost my picture there. There you go. Right, there's your Texas sheriff, right? Got his starched white shirt, his white hat, right, and his gun and his badge right there all for you, right? This. Yeah, that's actually, Lauren, you're right. That's actually a little on the wimpy side for a lot of sheriffs, but there it is, right? And so this here's the Sheriff's Association, right? They have their own association where all the sheriffs of Texas kind of come together, right, and hang out. There's usually you see the jeans there too. If they're going to be a little more upscale, you'll see them, right, with their hat and their coat, right, over their jeans. Here's your, a little bigger white hats there, right? So whoops, wrong click there. If y'all can see that, right, there's let's see if we can get the big picture of that one. No, it doesn't look like it, right? They like to take pictures too. This is the sheriff's office from Navarro County. So one of these folks is the sheriff. All the rest of them are deputies. But you see the common theme there on how they dress, right? That's that history, right? That's that Texas sheriff. The tie, right? The tie is the nod to being a little more, business oriented and administrative oriented. But that's the uniform, right? Now, there's not a uniform, but that's the uniform, right? If you get into a more urban county, right, you throw on a tie and a jacket, but you keep the hat, right? So, and I point this out, right? It's just a little bit of fun, but there's this, right, this notion of who the sheriff looks like, right? And if they're right out there in the world, right, it's gonna look like that. Now, if you get into Travis County and Harris County and Dallas County, they're full-on administrators, and so you're going to see them in a coat and tie suit, right? They may still have the hat, right, but they're going to be in a suit and tie, and you can tell when they get together for their annual Sheriff's Association picture. I wish I'd have found a good one. You've got the one that, the pressed jeans and starched white shirt with cowboy hat, and then you've got the suits, and you can tell, right, rural county, urban county, rural county. But the job they're doing is the same, right? As sheriff, their job is to ensure that in their county the law is being upheld, and so they're going to be elected. They're going to be responsible for staffing that sheriff's office with deputies. They're going to be responsible for maintaining and administering the county jail, which actually is almost as big a job as being sheriff on the law enforcement side, right? The county jail carries a lot of responsibility and a lot of money. We don't think about our sheriffs as administrators, but we should when we're electing them, because the size of most of the counties in Texas and the monies that are going through the sheriff's office are millions and millions and millions of dollars a lot of times. You think of running a county jail and all of the contracts that you have to have in place to run a jail properly, right? That you have medical contracts and contracts for food and contracts for cleaning and maintenance, and a lot of what the sheriff is going to be responsible for is ensuring that all of these things are working correctly, that contracts are in place, that the jobs are getting done, the bills are getting paid, and they're not, right, as a rule, not that they can't be, but as a rule, their major part of their workday is behind a desk managing this right law enforcement agency, the county sheriff's office. Now, most of them, although it's not required initially, most of them are law enforcement officers. They do have a license in Texas to be a peace officer, which means they've got their badge, their gun, and they can be a cop just like any other cop anywhere in the state of Texas. Now, the county that they administer is their county, right? And they're very protective of it. But sheriffs, just like any peace officers, are licensed by the state, and their ability to be a law enforcement officer is statewide. A lot of what they do, other than managing their own law enforcement agency and jail, is negotiate with the cities that are in their counties, right? Because what practically happens is the municipalities, the cities have their own police agencies and police chiefs of police. And so they have agreements that are drawn up between them about where they're going to focus their efforts so that they're not overlapping each other on a routine basis. Now I'm sorry, I'm touching my desk and I'm probably bouncing up and down. A sheriff is a sheriff for the whole county. It doesn't stop being a sheriff when you get inside of city limits or anything like that. But generally speaking, the sheriff and deputies of the sheriff are going to be focused on enforcing the law in those areas that are not incorporated, right? That are not part of the city. And on a general rule, the city and the city police are going to be the ones responsible for working inside the city limits. But there is overlap and there is coordination, and they work together. But there's an overlapping jurisdiction there for the sheriff because they have the whole county. And again, they're an elected constitutional office, right? So we can vote anybody into the office of sheriff. They just have to win the election, right? Statutorily, the legislature has come behind the Constitution and put in a requirement that sheriffs that are elected that are not law enforcement officers have a window of time, I think it's 2 years, to actually get their law enforcement license and become a peace officer. And during that time, when they're an elected sheriff but not a law enforcement officer, they're expected to not present themselves as a law enforcement officer. Or as a peace officer, right? They're the sheriff, but if they're going to arrest somebody, they need to call a law enforcement officer that's got a license to do that for them. And we've had to deal with that when I worked for T-Close for a while. We had a sheriff that was elected that wasn't a law enforcement officer, and essentially in the first week after they got elected, we were making contact with them saying, hey, when are you going to start your law enforcement classes, right, to get your license? And it wasn't a problem, right? I mean, they'd already planned to do that and knew where they were going. But it was an interesting thing because here's a person that is constitutionally the sheriff of a county, but not a cop, right? So it's a big position, a lot of authority, a lot of responsibility, sometimes a lot of swagger, right? But they're there as your chief law enforcement officer. Any questions about sheriffs before we move on? All right, next position we want to talk about at the county level is the county tax collector. A more updated term that you'll see used in the more urban areas is county tax assessor. Same general position, right? What they're doing is this is the office that collects the taxes for the county. Generally runs the licensing, the auto license department where you go to get your license plates and titles and things like that. They are responsible for ensuring that the elections occur at the county level, that people get registered to vote at the county level. So they're going to have some interaction with the Secretary of State, right, who is responsible at the top level for ensuring that these elections happen by state law. The tax assessors or collectors, the office that's going to be responsible for making it happen on the ground. The elected office, right, the tax collectors are. So again, same kind of issue can happen, right, with the judge or the commissioners or the sheriffs or the assessors. We're electing these folks, and whether we elect ones that have any experience or know what they're doing is kind of up to us as voters to vet out and pick good ones. but you could certainly be electing someone to be the tax collector that doesn't have a clue what the job's about, right? They just decided to run for office. And it becomes incumbent for there to be some kind of cultural, residual culture perspective that educates those people as to what their job is once they get elected. And so sometimes it can be a little bumpy that we hire people, we elect people to jobs that they've made a good campaign pitch for, but they don't have any experience in. So there's going to be some on-the-job training. Hopefully there will be some bureaucrats there that can say, okay, here's what you do, here's what we've been doing, and it'd be probably good to start off there, right? Before you go about changing things. So, very important office as far as maintaining what's going on with tax monies and getting things done. Quite often, right, these are the folks that are going to be doing. So Davin says, one that ran this year I knew of only worked as a secretary. That might have been actually pretty decent training for that job. Who knows, right? So I don't know. But that's one of the things, right, that they have to convince us during the election that they're going to do a good job. The problem, of course, is while they're trying to convince us they're going to do a good job if we elect them, most of us don't know what the job is we're electing them to do, what it really is and what it entails. So ignorance on our part can result in us electing people that are, less than capable, or maybe we get lucky and get if you're a secretary for an insurance agency, she's been managing and organizing and dealing with customers, might make a very good tax assessor. But it'll have to transition over to, here's how I did this kind of work, to now I've got to do this kind of work, and whether that's a good transition or not. But we elect these people. There's a burden on us as voters to pay attention, right, and to elect good people. And all of these folks are filling offices that do important things at the county level that most of us take for granted and don't think about. Their job is to take the money in, right? Their job is to provide an easy registration process for voters, and to, a lot of them now are managing, they've got a website under them that they have to manage that allows people to do this work online, and requires them to then be looking into hiring and managing computer professionals. And, there's all kinds of stuff going on that on a daily basis we don't think about. Oh, you're the tax collector, right? Yeah, and they got a lot of stuff going on. Next position is county treasurer or county auditor. These are the auditor is a newer term used again in urban areas, but it's still this generally doing the same work. There's a little extra stuff added on if you're truly an accredited auditor. But this position's job is, once the tax collector has got the money, somebody has to be responsible for looking after it and paying the county's bills and trying to safeguard that money, and that's the treasurer, right? They're the person in charge of the money, right? Once it's been collected, they're the ones in charge of the city's, or I'm sorry, the county's accounts, right? They're paying the county's bills, they're taking in the county's money, and one of the things we don't pay attention to, but they're asked to do quite often, is invest, right, county's monies. There's a lot of money coming in that's going to be sitting around sometimes, and it would be smart, right, for them to invest that money so that it makes more money for the county, right? Why let that money sit there and do nothing? And then there are elements of the county that have teachers and bonds and things like that, the investment is part of what's going on there, and they have to be managed. And so we're electing these people to be treasurers and stewards of our money, and they might be doing investments, and we don't know, are they, do they know a lot about investing millions and millions of dollars? Do they know about how they're going to handle bond processes and let people buy bonds from the county that will let the county then take that money and spend on projects? We don't, that's our job to make sure that that's happening, that these people are qualified as voters, right? And they're going to have millions and millions of dollars that they're going to be responsible for, right? More than that in a Houston or a Dallas County or right. So we should make sure that they know what they're doing before we elect them. Counties now have, some counties have both treasurers and auditors, or they they elect people who are qualified auditors to do both. But auditors' jobs are then to provide oversight and make sure that what's going on within the county with the monies and the departments and stuff that are there, that they're doing it the right way, and then project and build out budgets for those departments and for the county. Treasurers, right, quite often are elected. Auditors, quite often, if they're in excess of a treasurer, are appointed by a district court. So a judge does that, a district court judge does that, and appoints these folks to be independent of the county treasurer and to audit the county as a whole. So if you're going to do the auditor route that's independent, right, they're going to sit outside the process and audit what's going on and make recommendations and keep filing reports saying the county's doing good, the county's meeting their goals. Transition has usually been, right, we're moving away from treasurers and we're moving to auditors because they can do the treasurer's job and they can do the auditor's job. So as counties right, move forward and become more sophisticated, they're making more requirements and transitioning from treasurers to auditors instead of having both of them. So you'll see sometimes that you're just going to vote on an auditor. Again, right, though, this is a pretty important job, right? We need to be paying attention to it. So the county's got a lot going on, right? County also has a couple positions that deal with the courts at the county level. And for Texas, we're talking about county attorneys and county clerks. On this slide, I have both district attorneys and county attorneys. Because when you look at the court organization, these two overlap a lot. They're distinct positions, they're elected positions, and they're different people, right? You can't be both. But county attorneys are the attorneys that work for the county and represent the county in civil court cases that involve the county. In some of the less populous, sparsely populated counties, the county attorney is going to also do some criminal law. They're going to do some prosecution from the county level, but generally speaking, their focus at the county attorney level is civil law, and they're representing the county in court. In Texas, though, we also have district courts and most of those district courts exist within a county. Some exist but across counties. But district courts are those courts where the distinction between them and county courts is that felony criminal cases in Texas are assigned to district courts. So anytime you've got a case where it's going to carry jail time, especially, it's probably going to get sent up at a district court level. And so we elect district attorneys, right, to work in those district courts, and they're going to be, right, representing the state, in this case the district, and that district represents part of the county or the whole county for criminal matters. So their job is to put people in jail, right? The civil matters are contested cases, contested contracts, civil penalties, things like that. Those people aren't going to jail that the county attorney's dealing with, but the district attorney's putting people in jail. And these are the folks, right, that are going to be trying the very serious criminal cases, right? Your assaults and sexual assaults and homicides, and right, they're the ones that are going to be responsible for bringing those cases to the courts, presenting them in the courts, representing the criminal district that they're from. We elect both of these, the district attorney and the county attorney. So they're subject, of course, to the pressures of being elected and serving their constituents, which means they, right, are out there to make a name for themselves. Okay. Next, we get to talk a little bit about judges. Oh, I'm sorry, the clerks, right? The folks that actually make the district courts and the county courts work are the clerks that manage all the records for that, the county, and manage the records for the district courts. Let's talk about district courts first because it's much simpler. The clerks here are managing the case files of the district court, right? That's the records of the court. Right, all of the case work that happens in a district court has records. Right, it's required to have a record of the court decisions and the court findings, and the district clerk is to manage all of that. Not all of the courts in Texas require records, and so we don't have court clerks like at justice of the peace level. Right, we don't necessarily need them at that level. But when you get to the county level courts, right, the Constitutional County Court, the County Court of Law, these are courts of record, right? These are courts that generate results, that have fines and have probations and have, right, and you need records of all of that. And so the county clerk is responsible for managing all of those documents from the county court. But they're also managing the documents from the county commissioner's court, right? Which is that judge and those county commissioners and the decisions they're making while they're running the county. So the county clerk is managing all of this, right? And the county is the place that's responsible for issuing real estate titles, marriage licenses, right? They're responsible to work with to help record all of the election results at the county and the state level that occur within the county. So your county clerk, a lot of responsibility, and these are elected positions, right? And these are the people, you know, if you pay attention to the news, you'll see county clerks being brought up in court, right? Because sometimes they will do things based off of conviction versus based off of law and get themselves into trouble. If you remember, we've, you know, as marriage licenses became, you know, they were extended by the federal government to encompass all couples, same sex, right, or mixed sex, whatever the terms are, right? Marriages are now federally, right, allowed for everybody to, you know, pairs. And there were county clerks, right, in places in the United States that were like, we ain't doing that in my county. I'm not issuing them a marriage license, right? That ain't right. That goes against my religion. If you remember right, there were several of those, and they were sued, right, because they weren't following through and issuing a marriage license, right, by the law. So these people, right, they're got a hand in what's going on in your daily life, right? And they need to be, one, knowledgeable of the law, two, very organized in the work that they do in the office that they lead, right? They need to make sure that everything's being done right and cataloged right. And right, the last thing you want to do is go spend a couple $100,000 buying a house. And then, as you're trying to do that, you're doing a title check and realize there are claims against that piece of property, or worse, the clerk didn't do their job right and there are claims against property, but they're not in the files, and you buy a house that you end up having a contested title on. You're not a happy camper when that happens, right? And it's the county clerk and their office job to keep all those records straight and make sure that everybody knows what's going on when it comes to those type of issues. So big deal. These are big deal offices. Again, we elect these people. There aren't any requirements as to what they have to do to have that job, other than maybe some age requirements, maybe some criminal history checks, and then be elected, right? Finally, we've got the last thing we'll look at as far as positions at the county level that can impact you are county judges and county constables. So I already mentioned a little bit about the county judges, right? You've got the constitutional county judge, who is also your judge, right, on the commissioner's court, elected to that position, has constitutional authority to be a judge, but mainly focuses their work on running the county and being the CEO for the county. And then the legislature, right, passed legislation and created county courts of law, and their job is to do the same thing that the constitutional county judge did, and to relieve them of that burden. And so we have those county courts of law that judges are elected to handle misdemeanors, criminal misdemeanors that are fine and little to no jail time, civil cases, right? Those occur there. What else are they responsible for? We'd have done the chapter on courts. You'd have seen a lot more of what they're responsible for. I'm going to pull it up real quick so I can read it. County courts at law, all civil, criminal, original, and appellate actions prescribed by law for constitutional county courts, right? So those constitutional county courts are the one that the county judges, right, responsible for. So the legislature said all the things that he does, right, or she does over there in the constitutional county courts, and right, they extended the civil matters to $100,000, and in some cases, in like Dallas and Houston and Austin and San Antonio, it can be even higher than that. They have juvenile matters. They have uncontested probate matters. So any misdemeanor, criminal or civil, right? So a lot going on with these county level judges. And in some counties, you have a special court called a statutory probate court. And the judges that are in those positions are limited to just probate cases. And probate cases are cases that are dealing with contested wills and estates, right? So you die and you didn't have a valid will or a will at all, and there's people arguing over who gets what. Highly complicated bit of law in Texas, and so we have 18 or so probate courts that's what those judges at the county level are going to handle. Most of the time, in smaller counties, the county court at law is going to handle the probate issues. Constables are an interesting mix because they're law enforcement officers that are elected to manage the work for the courts. So the courts are doing their job, making their decisions, issuing bench warrants, issuing eviction notices, issuing, right, demands for payment, things like that. Constables are the police officers that are, there's one elected from each precinct. It's the chief constable. And then they can hire constables under them, police officers. Their job is to deliver those papers, those court papers. And you have a peace officer do this because, right, you may be evicting someone from property. You may be delivering an arrest warrant. So it needs to be someone that's knowledgeable in the law and been trained for this and has some ability to deal with really irate people. Because none of this is going to make anybody happy when you show up on their door and say, "Hey, you need to come to jail with me." Nobody likes that. Or, "Hey, you got to get out of your house." And those decisions that are made by courts, constables are the ones that's their job to take those court decisions and take them out into the public. And so these are peace officers that do this, that are elected to this position. And it's really widely varies or what goes on in the constable world. If you're a constable in a county like Travis County, right, you'll see Travis County constable cars, right, police cars, and they've got all the markings of a police car, and they've got a uniform, and they go through training, and they're professional, just like any other police officers. But you go out in some of the other less populated parts of Texas, and there may be a constable that's elected, and he doesn't have anybody working under him. He's responsible for the whole precinct. There are some out there that are unpaid. They do the job, right? They're elected to do the job, and the county doesn't pay them. They provide their own car, maybe a uniform, their own gas, their own weapon, their own ammo, right? So there's a lot of variances to how the job gets done. They're all peace officers, but a lot of them are doing this court work, right, as an elected position, and they have another job that they do that helps them make a living, right? So Texas is a land of wild differences between our rural and urban areas. All right, so we're done with counties. We're about to move into talking about cities as our next level of local government. Before I do that, are there any questions about county government? All right. So let's move down a level, right? Within your counties are cities. Cities, right, don't just pop out of nowhere. They're not just a group of people who decide to call themselves a city, right? There are laws in place about how cities come to be. And there are types of cities that determine what the type determines what the city can and can't do. Generally speaking, cities start off pretty small, and they need to get chartered by the state to be recognized as a city. And so they go through the process of being chartered. And what that means is that a group of people get together and they petition and they form, right, basically an organization to create a city. And they show, right, some density among the people. They show where they want city boundaries to be, and that none of those conflict with cities that already exist, that they're in a completely unincorporated area, that they will have some wherewithal to deliver city services and ability to say what those services are going to be. And they present that to the state as here's the majority of our city, our folks that want to do this in this area, and we want to be a town. And they fill out the paperwork and they get chartered by the state. At this level, they're chartered as what we call a general law city. Small city, 5,000 or less in population. They just, they're wanting to get some city services. They're wanting to get a city limits and some control over a certain area. And so they charter that. The state recognizes them as a general law city. And with that recognition comes the list of things they can do. General law cities are only allowed to to have ordinances, to make ordinances, and to what the state says they can do, right? They are a subdivision in a sense of the state government, just like the county. A general law city can do what the state allows them to do. So they are restricted in their authority. And this is mainly a way of being of the state being able to uniformly say, here's what these little cities across Texas can do. Right? Y'all can do this. Your little city, this is what you can do. Right? And we don't want to mess with you now. There you are. You're there. Go be a city. There is a provision, though, that as a city's population grows, and once it exceeds 5,000, that it can transition from a general law city to what we call a home rule city. And I'll show you the slide for that so you can get the title, home rule city. And so the transition there, right, is one that is based upon the city. Once they've reached 5,000 folks, they essentially have an election, right? They have a vote among the city population about whether we want to be a general law city or whether we want to transition to a home rule city. And what that does is it gives them more power. It gives them the ability to have more control than a general law city has. But the reason you want to become a general law city at all, right, even though you may eventually transition to home rule, is you want to develop some services. You want to maybe have a police department, or usually police department's not the first thing that drives an unincorporated area to be a city. It's the desire to have emergency services, as in fire and ambulance. City police are usually right behind that. And then you'll get into concerns about city water, city sewage, maybe a city cable or something like that if it's managed by the municipality. So you transition because you want some uniform set of services to be available to everybody that's in the city. Or as another motivation to create a city, cities have a unique ability to protect themselves from other cities, right? If you're living in an unincorporated area, right, just part of the county, but not part of any city, another city may annex you, whether you want to be annexed or not. As unincorporated people living in an unincorporated area, you don't have any organized authority. And so a city, right, has the ability through law to grow, to annex more property and the people that live in that area. And if you're unincorporated, the city can do that subject to some rules, but they can annex unincorporated areas, and you may find yourself now a citizen of Austin with all of the taxes and fees that implies, and you didn't want that. Luckily, one of the rules that cities have to follow is a publishing and publication of a 3-year annexation plan. And it has to be published 3 years before they start to do it. And so people that live in unincorporated areas that become aware of here comes Austin and they're going to gobble us up are motivated to organize and charter a city in that 3 years, because once you become a city, general law or home rule, no other city can annex you unless the majority of your city population agrees. So it gets you a protection against annexation. And so that's another motivation, right? That maybe you and your neighbors didn't care much about city services, and that wasn't motivating you to become a city, but you don't want to be part of Austin, and that may motivate you to put together a city so that you can protect yourself. Now, unfortunately, right, for those folks in that position, once you become a city, now you've got to provide city services, right? There's a certain level of city services that are expected. So Maybe not the best solution, but it's how you protect yourself from annexation. Um, and then as your city, through inertia or good politics or good policy, grows, you get the opportunity as you go past 5,000 citizens um, to become a home rule city. And what's seductive about this transition from general law city to home rule city is it flips the authority that the city has. Right? A general law city can only do those things the state lets it do. But a home rule city can do anything that the state hasn't prohibited them from doing. Right? So it's flipping the logic there, saying, oh, you're a home rule city? Here's the list of things that the state says you can't do. The rest of it, kind of figure that out on your own as a city, right? And so that's a lot more open-ended and a lot more opportunity there for the city to manage who they are and where they're going and what they're going to do. You make that transition from general law city to home rule city through a vote of city residents, right, that are qualified to vote. And if you get a majority of them that vote for the transition, then you do, right? You change your charter from a general law to a home rule and adjust everything the way you need to make that transition. And then you start passing ordinances. Then you can redesign your city government to a different form of government. So you can have different ways of electing people to serve on city government, right? A lot of different options become available. Generally speaking, the general law cities have the form of government that you would expect, right? What we refer to as a strong mayor system. So let's talk about the forms of government that are out there that are available for city governments to use and to put into place. In Texas, we have 4. We have what's called a mayor council system, which has a strong mayor council or a weak mayor council, or 2 different types. And we'll talk about each of those. We also have a council manager system of government that a lot of cities use. And then there was historically a commission version of government. So let's move through these. When you're a general law city, the state tells you you're going to be a strong mayor form of government. And what that means is very straightforward. You've got a city council, you've got a mayor, right? The city council is, those folks are elected. There's, say, 4 of those, generally speaking. And you've got a mayor, again, also elected. So there's 5 on the council as a whole, just like that county government with a judge and commissioner. And the mayor is like the county judge, but for the city. They're responsible for running the city, right? That's their job, to be the administrative leader of the city. And so the mayor, the strong mayor, is hiring people that run the departments in the city. They fire people. They have a veto power like the governor has, right, over the city council. Their city council has override ability over the mayor, right? The mayor prepares the budget, presents it to the council. They vote on it, right? So it's your very standard, very straightforward design for government that covers the city. And your strong mayor is your CEO, and your council members are your legislative branch, basically. And this is what we have at the general law level, and even at some home rule levels, they will keep this design. Right? There's nothing that makes them change. And you know that you need to elect a mayor that has pretty good head on their shoulders, because she's going to be running the government, right? The city government on a day-to-day basis. And now, in consultation and obviously following what the city council passes, but they got a lot of power. Most cities, though, at some point, their population gets to the point that the issues that they're dealing with are bigger and require a different approach, and they move away from the strong mayor council. And the only big city in Texas that still uses this is Houston. Um, and they're an anomaly, right? There's no other city. I mean, that's the biggest city in Texas, right? The city limits of Houston, there are over 2 million people. And so if you're the mayor of Houston, right, you're overseeing a very large city government with a lot of city departments. And as mayor, you're responsible for hiring and firing and managing and leading all of those departments. And so the city council right there, I think there are 15 members on the city council in Houston. There's a lot. Some of them are representatives of areas of Houston, and some of them are at large representing the whole city of Houston. But the fact is, on a day-to-day basis, it's the mayor that's making the decisions about where Houston goes. And so that makes you a pretty big person, politically speaking, if you got right the day-to-day stewardship of a city of 2 million. And as a matter of fact, the person that's governor right now, the person that's mayor right now of Houston used to be a state House rep, right? Sylvester Turner was a representative from Houston at the state level, and left that position to run and become mayor of Houston. So and saw that as a step up, right? So Houston is kind of they're an anomaly here, but they're still using this system to run their government. So it's a strong mayor council. Most of the other cities that are of any size that still use a mayor council system use what we call a weak mayor council system, which means the mayor they have administrative duties that go along with being mayor of the city, and or ceremonial duties, and some administrative duties as far as presiding over the council. But their voting power, their power as an office, is exactly the same as all the other council members, which is why we call them a weak mayor. They are a member of the council. So the city elects council members, and they elect a mayor, and that mayor has the same political power as any other council member. But you've got to have somebody that's leading all of that, that's presiding over the meetings, that is the face of the city in ceremonies and things like that. And that's what the weak mayor does. But politically speaking, they don't have any more clout or any more ability than any other council members do. Same amount of power. And so what you basically have is a group of people that, on their own power as a group, drive the city on a day-to-day basis. They make decisions as a group, as opposed to that strong mayor one where the mayor's making decisions on a day-to-day basis. And so some cities like this because it doesn't concentrate too much power in one place. The more, and I say progressive here in a sense of not politically progressive, but progressive in the sense of more contemporary or contemporaneous design of government that is used once a city becomes a home rule city, is the council manager design. Most of your bigger cities, 10,000, 25,000 on up to millions in Texas are cities that are working under this design. And what this essentially is a weak mayor system with a city manager. Okay, so you've got a council, you've got a city council, you've got one person on that council that's the mayor, right? But the council as a whole, they all hold the same amount of power, decision-making power, and they're making decisions at a high level, and then they pass as a council those decisions down to a city manager. And that city manager is someone that they've hired, the council has hired, to run their city on a day-to-day basis. That city manager hires and fires people, right? like a strong mayor would, but they are hired and fired by the council. So, right, it's not an elected person like a strong mayor is that's making these decisions. It's somebody that's hired by the council and works under their direction. So what this does is it allows people to be less than professional in their development about when they get elected on the city council, right? So you get elected to the city council, maybe you don't know a whole lot about how the city runs, but that's okay. Your job is to represent, right, the city that you're a council member from, or the part of the city that you're elected from, and what those folks want. And then it's the job of the people you hire who are professionals, city managers, to do the work, right? And these city managers are quite often folks that have higher education in accounting or business administration or government politics, right? And then they have an advanced degree usually in public policy or public administration, which gets them quite often an internship working in a city, right? And they get on the job training and on hands experience, and then they apply for jobs as assistant city managers or city managers, and that's their career, right? So they want to be the person that runs the city, but they don't hold any authority in their office unless the council gives it to them, right? So they're working at the behest of the council that's hired them. What this does is it gets you a professional that knows how the different departments of the city are supposed to work and how city budgeting and contracting works and employment issues and personnel issues. It gets you somebody that knows all of those ins and outs of how a city runs, and you, as a council, you hire that person, right, to come in and provide that professional leadership. And then if they don't do a good job, you fire them and you hire somebody else. And that, and so the council and the mayor and the council manager system are passing ordinances, making, right, the law in the city, and then handing that down to the bureaucrat, the city manager, to implement it and make it happen. Right. And this is, when you look at cities like Austin or San Antonio or Dallas, right, Waco, this is the design that's most prevalent of how we organize our governments. And this is the option that being a home rule city gets you, is these choices of what kinds of city governments to have and to make. The last one is we present it because, one, it's legal. Two, historically, we've had it in Texas, but it doesn't exist right now. To my knowledge, there is not a city in Texas that works under the design we call the city commission system. And initially, Galveston didn't work this way either until they had a reason to change. And the reason that they had, I think they were a strong mayor system at the time, is the hurricane of 1900 wipes out Galveston Island, right? Thousands and thousands of people are killed by this monster hurricane. They didn't name them back then, so we just call it the 1900 hurricane. And so the city's, right, councils is presented with a really, really huge undertaking here, and that's rebuild the city of Galveston. Right, there are thousands of people living on the island. They've lost thousands of city members, right, city citizens. The infrastructure of the city is gone, and they got to get things up and running, and they got to do it now. People are going to keep dying if they don't get water and electricity and roads and bridges and produce and food coming in, and and they don't manage this emergency. So they reformed themselves into a commission, and the commission was designed so that each person on what had previously been a council member, each person was put in charge of a specific part of the city government. You're in charge of fire department, go do it. You're in charge of roads, go do it. And there was nothing else, right? They were in a situation where they said, okay, right, take the people that worked in this area for the city that are still here. You're in charge of them. Go do what you think's best for the city of Galveston, but do it fast, right? So they eliminated all of the voting and all of the politics and well, not the politics, the politicking that would go on between council members and such. And they just assigned council members now as commissioners over a department in the city government, and they went out and they rebuilt Galveston. And if I remember right, they kept this design for 20 or 30 years afterwards, right? Each council member, right, each commissioner, I'm sorry, that was elected to the commission was elected to a position that controlled underneath that commission's position a part of city government, right? And they managed the parks department or the road department or right the water and wastewater department. That commissioner was responsible for a part of the city government. Now, once the emergency was over and they still kept this commission design, the council did issue ordinances and directives, and then the commissioners of that area that the ordinance affected were responsible for implementing it. But essentially, that put an awful lot of power into individuals' hands, right? And it's a different way of doing things. But eventually, the decision and the perspective was that it put too much power in one area into one person's hand, and so they eventually moved away from the commission design. But there's nothing that prevents a city, right, a home rule city, from deciding that the way they want to organize themselves and make that happen. So those are our four designs of government, right? We've got the strong mayor, right, council, and the weak mayor council. We have the council manager with the professional manager and the city commission. So those are your four forms of government, right? Later, we will talk about different ways of electing people in these cities to these forms of governments, right? So we'll talk about that at a little later lecture next time, probably. The next topic we're going to cover, though, is right. You've got a city. You got a type of government over that city. This city's going to change. This city's going to grow. And the term for the growth of the legal growth of the boundaries of a city, how they expand their political boundaries, that term is annexation, right? Cities annex property, which extends the political boundaries of the city. Now, I got here the question, why do cities grow? Well, one, I think it's if a city is doing things well, people want to live there, right? People will move there. Businesses will be there. And what happens, of course, is that as you get concentration in the city center, there's scarcity there, prices go up, and people start move into areas around the city center, but maybe not actually in the city. Businesses may do the same thing. And so what you have is the city trying to control what's going on there, but a lot of people and businesses around the city that aren't subject to the city's ordinances, aren't subject to the city's public safety issues, don't provide any kind of tax or fee to the city. And so the city is finding themselves either wanting to bring those monies in or wanting to extend control to those areas. And if those places, those people are living are unincorporated, they can, right? So cities grow because they need to sometimes, and they grow because they want to. But the fact is that if the area next to a city is unincorporated, they can, right, through the proper procedures, annex that area and those people and make them citizens of that city. Now, that doesn't make everybody happy, but it can happen. The major limitation on annexation is that a city cannot annex another city unless that other city wants to be annexed. So this puts a definite limitation on the growth of a city, right? It's limited to unincorporated areas unless another city wants to join them. Now we talked a little bit about, right, cities, why cities become cities, right? They want services, they want maybe protection from annexation, right? So these are the thoughts that are going through people's head as cities are created. But then there's also concerns, right, about how this annexation is going to work and how the new city might impact you if you don't have your own. And so a lot of different thoughts going on there. Over time, as we've seen cities grow, we also see that there becomes competition between cities, right? Because think of Austin as a city and Cedar Park as a city. And if you've been here long enough, you can remember when there was land between the two cities that that land was neither a part of Cedar Park or Austin or Pflugerville or Austin or Round Rock, right? There was unincorporated area. And as people move into the area, right, the cities might want to annex it. And they might both want to annex it, right? So what you have developed over time is competition between cities over how they're going to grow and what land is going to be there. And so the state has had to come up with rules to manage this competition of annexation between the cities. Ways of limiting it, ways of making the annexation have some sense and coherency about it. And so we're going to talk about some of those rules, right, that impact how cities grow and why they grow the way they do. The first major rule that acts as a limitation on the growth of a city is that the state limits cities to 10% growth of their current territory. So to make it simple, think you've got a city and it's 10 miles square, right? 10 miles east-west, 10 miles north-south, it's the square, right? It's 100 square miles. The state says that city, right, that is it's 1 mile, but no, I'm messing this up. It's 5 miles by 2 miles. That's what I want. 5 miles wide by 2 miles long. So it's 10 square miles. What I'm trying to do is limit the number so that my little head can handle them. So a city is 10 square miles, right? And they're limited now by the state to expanding 10% per year. That means this year they're 10 square miles, they can annex 1 square mile of territory this year. The city does allow them to bank their 10% for up to 3 years. So a city that has 10 square miles doesn't annex land for year 1, it doesn't annex land for year 2. But in year 3, now that it's got 3 years of unannexed time, it can annex 3 square miles at one time. And so they can bank it and grab a bigger chunk at a later time. And so cities have to look at this and figure out, how do we want to grow? Where do we want to grow? Where we're wanting to grow is it most important for us to grow first? And there's a city, a mile over that way that maybe they want to annex this. Are we racing to get the same territory? Do we care? So this limitation on how much you can annex prevents a city just from going crazy and grabbing up a bunch of land. One of the other limitations is that when a city decides to annex territory, they have to be annexing territory that is contiguous to their city limits, to the boundaries they already have. In other words, if they want to annex some land, part of that land they want to annex has to touch the city limits that they already have. So Austin can't go up by Waco and annex a square mile of land up there, right? They have to annex land that is touching the bases of city limits of Austin. So this means that they grow as a contiguous unit of land, right? There's always some piece of land connecting them, the city's pieces and parts. And so this limits what they can do, right? Because they have to, if they want a piece of land and it's further away from them than they can get in 1 year or 3 years, then they have to plan that and grow in that direction so that they can get next to it to annex it. Other limitations. When a city annexes a property, an area, they have a requirement on them to deliver all of the city services that they deliver to the rest of their citizens to that newly annexed area. They can't grab a piece of land and say, but no city water for you, right? Now there's a time frame, right? They don't have to, right? You're talking infrastructure here, so this is not going to happen overnight. So there's time frames here, but generally speaking, a city needs to be expanding their city services to new annexed territory within 2.5 years. If there are very complex issues or reasons why they can't, they can petition to extend that out to 4.5 years. So this limits what cities try to do because they know this requirement is on their backs once they annex land that doesn't have services provided to it, right? They're going to be on the hook, right, for development, implementation, paying for, right, all of the services, and the city as a whole is going to have to finance it. So they have to be prepared to do that within a certain time frame. So that serves to limit growth. And then, as I've already mentioned, they have to be very transparent about where they're going and when they're going to be there. So they are required by the state to put out 3-year annexation plans, and that's putting out there in public a 3-year notice of where they're going, where they plan to go, which lets people living in those unincorporated areas time to organize, incorporate as a city, and then manage whether they come into that city or not. It also puts other cities on notice about where the city wants to go, and it may initiate a race, right? And then that city has to say, no, we want it. We're going to put out our 3-year plan, and then at the end of 3 years, they're racing to see who can get there with the amount of property that they can annex. All right, so let's call it a day there. We'll end on slide 24 today. Any questions for today? All right, so we'll come back next week and we'll pick up and continue talking about annexation. Y'all have a good day. Thank you, Riley. Lauren, have a good weekend.